Welcome to our podcast, and we will be taking a journey which we welcome you to join us with. My name is Auntie.
And my name's Ariel.
Auntie and Ariel have a lot of good stories to tell and a lot of knowledge to learn. My name is Auntie. It is a title that I've had my entire adult life. The name Auntie and the Auntie that I've always been is a go-to. Mm-hmm. The Auntie that I am is that person that you can talk to, you can not talk to, you can laugh, you can cry, you can do it all because I am Auntie. Mm-hmm. And I welcome that in our relationship, whoever you are and whoever is or isn't part of my life.
That's beautiful. So Auntie signifies to you someone who cares for others and wants to share their knowledge with others.
And wants to make people feel welcome to approach me. That makes me approachable.
That's beautiful. Okay. So I think a good question to start out with, I think the audience might be really interested in hearing is, so is this the first time you've ever done a podcast?
I'm going to go so far as to say I've never heard a podcast, ever. This is the first one I'm making and the first one I'm hearing, which makes it, I think, kind of an interesting aspect because it's natural. It's not that I'm copying a podcast thing that I heard. I'm not imitating a podcast. I'm creating the first one I've ever heard or seen or spoken. And I think that that's going to make it more natural and more real.
Yeah, I know. I agree with that. But from someone who is a big podcast listener, you're doing great.
Oh, thank you very much.
So, to begin, I think it's important to ask, what made you want to make your own podcast?
Well, because, first of all, Ariel has been approached to me as a student, and so, we're approaching this from two different levels. One is a person who is older and wise and have had many experiences, and I'm working with someone who is young and has a lot of other things to contribute. A knowledge of podcasts, which I don't have. The how to approach it, I don't have. So I think as a combination, we've got a good formula. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree. And I also have a lot to learn from you as well. So
thank you. It goes both ways.
But back to the question. What made you want to make the podcast?
I think because recently I wrote a book of poetry, which was a brand new experience and something that I didn't know I could do. How I got into discovering my ability to write poetry came from a medical situation where I was sitting still for 4 hours, 3 days a week. That being said, I was frustrated, I was angry that I had to do this. And so it started off with me writing how I felt. And then as time went on, I started to notice that my ability to express myself through poetry was real and was strong. And at maybe the 3/4 mark, approximately, I realized that not only was I writing poetry, which I didn't know I could do, the poetry I was writing turned out to be my life story. And it was set up in 5 different chapters, 5 different subjects, and those subjects led me to feel that I think, as a matter of fact, I'll tell you what this was as well. Mm-hmm. A friend of mine's husband, he printed the book for me, and in reading it, he said to her, "I want to speak to Yvonne." And what he said to me was, "This does not belong on a shelf. This belongs to be known out there because there's so much in this that is important and would be very helpful to many people." Mm-hmm. And that stayed in my head. Now, recently, I learned about podcasts. And I said, gee, that would be a very good venue because that would be something that would get out there and share what I had to. He was right in what he said. And it made me feel motivated to do it. Mm-hmm. So when you, Ariel, came into the picture, I said, podcast. And you said, great idea, because you are a podcast person. So
Thanks.
you know what it's all about and the value of it. And I think more importantly as well, I think I express things fairly well.
Mm-hmm.
So if you ask me a question, I think I can answer it with interest to you and people listening to the podcast.
I definitely can attest to that, yes.
Okay. Question.
Yeah. No, so it sounds like you took a very personal story and you took a hard time and used poetry as a way to heal. And now that you want to take your stories and share it with others.
Right.
That's
Exactly.
really good. So why do you feel like your stories will be relevant to others?
Because my stories are not just a story. It's not about, oh, and then, I had my wedding, and then I had my children, and then I did all the things that people did in those days, especially going back in my times. Getting married was in the 20s. It couldn't be anything later, so, it's a different a different stipulation, shall we say. And so for me, I never went that road. And as I told my story, I recognized the value of the different subjects I was approaching. So there's 5 subjects that get approached, and those 5 subjects will be the 5 podcasts we're going to do, other than the first one, which is my introduction, which is what we're doing now.
Yeah.
And so the topics are as follows: metamorphosis.
Mm-hmm. So you're going to do, you want to explain a bit each of the subjects?
Okay, I can do that.
Perfect.
So metamorphosis is a change you want to bring about in some aspect of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
It could be your lifestyle. It could be where you are in your life. It could be your education decisions. It's anything that you want to take where you are and change.
Mm-hmm.
So metamorphosis is depicted in the book as a caterpillar that goes into the cocoon and then becomes a caterpillar. That is the vision I have for metamorphosis in a person. You can take what you are, who you are, and grow to where you want to be. Metamorphosis. The next title, which is the next podcast, would be Phoenix. Phoenix, when you see the word Phoenix anywhere, it goes from death to life. And where that is going is situations in my life where I would use the word, it was a dead situation where I had no feeling for it. I didn't know or care where it was and where it was going. And then as time went on, the phoenix rose in my life. And that aspect is where I learned to become not that dead person anymore and have things goals that mattered. And that's the rising of the phoenix, the rising from the dead. The next title is Invisible and Non-Visible. Invisible is, no, sorry, I take that back.
Oh, good.
Visible that becomes invisible.
Okay.
And so visible is the personality, the person you are seen as being. It's a visual. It's not just visual, it's a knowledge of people knowing who you are. That's the visible part. And the invisible is what's inside of you, the part of you that nobody really knows. And it's the part of you that stays inside of you until you're ready for it not to be there anymore. And that's the transition from visible to invisible. And then the next one is called third person. Now, third person is difficult to explain in a way and difficult to understand as well. And that's why when I do the podcast for this subject, I'm going to read, I wrote a poem, short poem on third person. And that third person gets explained as to what it is. And what, in just in a general thought, third person is the person I created to live the life I couldn't, where the pain was too deep to feel, and I couldn't feel it anymore. So what I did is I created a whole other person, a person who didn't express thought or feeling. I didn't cry. I didn't really laugh from my gut, you know. So I just lived a life through a persona that I created, and that was my third person. And just for the record, I have since then discovered that third person is in fact a term used in psychology. It is not an unknown term.
Oh, wow.
When I said it in this type of context, that people said, yeah, no, I know what a third person is. And I'm shocked to hear that, but it's apparently is there. And I guess when I think about it, there's logic to that. Because in fact, it is a personality problem. It is an opening who you are problem. And so for psychologists and or anything in that field, third person exists and they know what it is.
Yeah.
So that's the third person. And last and very much not the least is peace. And peace is for me, and I believe for many people, peace is the end of it's the goal of the journey. The journey you take, whatever that path may be, ultimately what you want is to feel peaceful. You want to feel okay inside and out. And that's what peace is about. And that is the goal of the journey.
So it sounds like the 5 episodes are basically going to be taking people through your journey.
But it's not just my journey, it's a journey that other people have as well, actually. It's not just me. It's me telling this. The story I'm telling is me, 100%. But what I express in it and the message I'm trying to share is not just mine. It's for people who have these kind of issues. And so I welcome everybody on our journey and for them to take from it what can help them feel better.
And is that why you called the podcast Journey then?
Yeah, it is definitely. Because I believe it is a journey. Whatever change or whatever aspect those 5 subjects are bringing in, all of them are the beginning, going through something, and it's becoming a journey where you're headed towards an accomplishment, and that's your journey.
That's beautiful.
Thank you.
And what are you hoping that others gain or accomplish by listening to your podcast?
I guess that what I'm hoping for is that whatever issue, and most people have some issue, my issues. Well, what I want this to take to other people and for them to is, almost every one of so what this I would hope would bring to other people is a familiarity, some thought, some feeling about whatever they're dealing with. I believe that most people have something deep inside that's too painful to feel. And that is what I'm hoping the podcasts, as they are spoken and as they are heard, will take that person to a place where they can start their own journey to improve and relieve themselves of whatever that is, that pain so deep. And there is a poem I wrote which kind of comes into play here, and it's called Hidden Pain. And hidden pain is something that I would say a large percentage of people have something inside of them that they didn't deal with, are afraid to deal with, and I think listening to the podcast might be helpful for that.
You find that listening to the podcast might help them to sort of bring about or acknowledge what they're hiding.
Well, I have a theme, so to speak. It's called ACC, and it's the way the journey goes. So the first part of the journey is awareness. is recognizing what your issue is. What is it that is something you want to address? What is it that you want to make different or better? So that awareness takes you to the next step, which is called choice. And choice is something that reflexive behavior doesn't use that process of choice. In other words, there's many things you do that are not good, and they're not the way you would want them to be. But what you don't recognize, and where the awareness becomes into play, is that making a better choice makes for a better result. Mm-hmm. And then that takes me to point number 3, which is change. Once you've accomplished the skill of making better choices, recognizing that your choices are not good choices and should be changed, will improve the outcome, which is change. And when you accomplish the change, your journey is not done, because these things go in circles. Mm-hmm. There's a time that it's good, there's a time that it's not good. You're productive, you're not productive. So these five chapters, 5 podcasts, I believe will touch people where they have their hidden pain.
Yeah. And just something I wanted to touch on, just having known you for a bit and having worked on this project with you for a while now, is that one of the beauty of your story and your journey that you're sharing and the lessons you learned from it is how it's really applicable to people of all ages. I think it could be a teen, it could be someone in their later years of life. I don't think that the lessons you have to share are limited to a certain age group or to any specific type of person.
Exactly. Thank you very much. That's exactly what I was hoping for.
Yeah.
I don't want it to be age specific. I don't want it to be issue specific. Mm-hmm. I had a child that I gave up for adoption. People that go through that, I think they could feel what I have to say about it, and they can apply it to their own healing journey. Yeah. I was morbidly obese. Certainly another very important topic where, I ate my way through that experience, which I did not know when I was doing it. In other words, in 10 years, I went from 220 pounds to 400 pounds. 405 pounds. And that was something that was directly related. How I discovered that is that when the Oprah show contacted me, and once I was going to be on the Oprah show to tell my story. However, that particular show was about people who have not reached their goal yet, and I had already lost 200 pounds. Mm-hmm. So I didn't belong on the show, and that ended that. Mm-hmm. But they asked me for a picture history, and when I looked at the picture history, I said, there's always this number, this 220, that always was my turning point. The minute I came to 220 pounds in a weight loss, I would turn around and start going back up again, not recognizing why, until that picture history. Mm-hmm. And I said, when was I 220 pounds originally? And when did that cycle start? I looked at the picture history, and there it was. It was the weight I was when I came back from giving birth. Mm-hmm. It was the weight I was when I signed the adoption papers. And it's the weight I was where my pain came forward. And that was, signing my son out of my life. Although I never regret it, because I gave him the chance for a better life. And in later years, when we did have contact, he said to me that because of that decision, he had a blessed life. So I want young people who are facing that issue to understand that it can turn out to be the best choice for the child. Mm-hmm. And that comes to something that I find very important, is unconditional love. And to me, that's what a mother should have, is unconditional love. Mm-hmm. And that's what I did. Even though it broke my heart into every deep pain I could find, it was the right thing to do. Mm-hmm. And so on. So each of the things that I lived, and it goes on, and there's many aspects to it. And then when things changed and I could no longer walk the beaches, I could no longer go in a canoe, I could no longer travel with my cousin. We went all over the United States and more. And all those things were gone out of my life because I got kidney failure. And the kidney failure took me over my life at that time. And all the things that I did, I could no longer do. And I think that that's yet another thing that people who experience what I've experienced will understand, that this is the time when a book came out with my poetry. I'm proud of this book, very proud. And on the cover of the book is a butterfly, because the butterfly is what, and the word journey, that the butterfly is exactly that. You become a butterfly, and the butterfly is all the beautiful features of that being. I think that given that this was the time of my life where it all had come to an end, all the traveling and so on, I was able to put my emotions somewhere else. And that is the message of a podcast for me, is to tell people it doesn't destroy who you are. You can learn from who you are with these kind of experiences.
Yeah, and just to build on that, I think as someone who's not experienced your experiences and have not gone through the same things that you have, I still think there's so much to learn from your stories and ways to relate to what you've experienced, regardless if you've been through the same situations or not.
Yeah. Well, it may not be the same, but most people have their own
struggles.
It could be coming from a divorced family, for example, what that does to the emotions. Just actually 2 days ago, an example of where emotions manifest themselves a certain way. There was a death of a young mother leaving behind 2 children, and the boy would dress up in her clothing and sit in her chair, and he did his hair to look kind of like her and so on. He resembled her very strongly, and he did this because he didn't want her to be dead. So he brought her back to life by doing that, you see? So everybody has their own behavior to deal with what they cannot deal with.
Yeah.
And so that's why I did the podcast. That's what I'm hoping that people who listen to the podcast will apply it to whatever their own personal issues are. And even if they don't have issues, they'll hear a good story, and they'll take from it what they can. And when the time comes in their future, and it will, they will have a resource of where to go back to.
Amazing, incredible. I just want to say it's incredibly brave of you to share your story, and I feel like people will really benefit from that. And as we're closing off and we're ending the first episode, is there anything else or any last message you want to send to your listeners?
I don't think so. I think we've kind of covered it fairly deeply. Basically what I'm saying is that there are journeys to be done, journeys to take, and that, like the butterfly who starts off as a caterpillar and ends up as a butterfly, that's what I see is a vision of someone who's listened to a podcast and has learned something from it.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, and I guess they'll just have to join us next week to learn about metamorphosis and what it means to you.
Absolutely.
Okay, so that's it for this week.
Thank you.